Disclaimer. This story explores mature emotional themes surrounding relationships, love, and personal truth. While it contains no explicit material, viewer discretion is advised. The beginning. The night before the engagement party, under the dim glow of the city skyline, Olivia's world shifted with 6 whispered words. There's something I need to tell you. She had always loved the way Naomi spoke. Measured, thoughtful, as if every word she chose held weight. But tonight, there was something different in her tone. A hesitation, a tremble, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of her usually confident voice. Olivia glanced up from her glass of red wine, her heart suddenly uneasy. "What is it?" she asked, searching Naomi's deep brown eyes for an answer before the words even left her lips. Naomi hesitated, running a hand through her tousled dark curls. She was stunning, even in her nervousness. No, especially in her nervousness. The candlelight flickered between them, casting golden hues against the tension hanging in the air. They had been best friends since college. Years of late-night conversations, whispered secrets, and a connection so seamless that it never needed defining. Yet here they were, on the eve of Olivia's engagement to Daniel, a man who was safe, kind, and everything she thought she wanted. Until now. "I should have told you a long time ago," Naomi finally said, exhaling like she had been holding her breath for years. "But Her voice faltered, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. Olivia set her own drink down, the cool glass suddenly feeling too fragile in her hands. "Naomi." Her voice was softer now, filled with an unfamiliar kind of urgency. Naomi looked away, as if searching the room for an escape, but there was none. Not from this, not from Olivia. "I love you." The words hung in the air, suspended between them, heavier than the silence that followed. Olivia blinked, as if she hadn't heard right, as if the earth beneath her feet hadn't just tilted off its axis. Naomi let out a quiet, self-deprecating laugh, shaking her head. "I've always loved you, Liv." A heartbeat passed, then another. The sounds of the city buzzed faintly outside, a world still turning while Olivia's own had come to a standstill. She should say something, anything. But how could she when the ground had just been pulled from beneath her? She thought back to every stolen glance, every almost touch, every moment that had felt bigger than friendship but had never been named. Had she been blind? Or had she just been afraid? Naomi stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with the force of a decision she had no intention of taking back. "I know I shouldn't have said anything, not now, not when you're about to—" She stopped herself, her voice raw. Olivia's heart pounded. "Naomi, wait." But Naomi was already turning toward the door. And just like that, Olivia was left alone with the weight of something undeniable, something that had always been there, waiting to be spoken into existence. Tomorrow she was supposed to say yes to Daniel, but tonight had changed everything. Olivia sat in the dim glow of her apartment, staring at the untouched glass of wine in front of her. The city hummed outside, neon reflections dancing against her window, but inside, everything was still. Too still. Naomi's words echoed in her mind, over and over, like a song she couldn't turn off. "I love you." It should have been a simple confession, something to acknowledge, to appreciate, to set aside. But it wasn't simple. Not when it came from Naomi. Not when it unraveled years of carefully woven certainty. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Naomi's name. She had to talk to her. She had to. A knock at the door made her jump. For a brief, ridiculous moment, she thought it might be Naomi. That maybe she had turned back. That maybe... But when she opened the door, it was Daniel. His familiar, easy smile greeted her, but something in his eyes shifted when he saw her face. "Hey," he said, stepping inside without needing an invitation. "Everything okay? You left the party early." The party. Their engagement party. The one where she was supposed to be celebrating the next chapter of her life, not questioning it. Yeah, she lied, closing the door behind him. Just tired. Daniel's fingers brushed against hers as he reached for her hand, the warmth familiar, comforting, safe. You sure? He asked, tilting his head, concern softening his expression. You seem off. Olivia forced a smile. I'm fine, really. But as Daniel pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, she couldn't ignore the hollowness in her chest. She had spent years convincing herself that love was about choosing the right person, the one who made sense. But what if love wasn't about logic at all? Across the city, Naomi sat in the driver's seat of her car, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She shouldn't have said anything. She had spent years burying those feelings, telling herself that Olivia was happy, that they were just friends, that it didn't matter if her heart ached every time Olivia looked at her a certain way. But tonight, it had mattered. Tonight, she had looked at Olivia and seen something in her eyes, something that made her reckless. She sighed, leaning her head back against the seat. This was a mistake. She should go home. Forget everything. Move on. But even as she told herself that, her hands were already reaching for her phone. And then, before she could talk herself out of it, she sent a message. Naomi, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. She hesitated, then typed again. Naomi, but if you felt something, if any part of you felt something too, then please, don't pretend it didn't happen. She hit send, and then she waited. In Olivia's apartment, her phone vibrated against the counter. She stared at the screen, her breath caught somewhere between hesitation and inevitability. She knew that if she opened that message, there would be no going back. And yet, her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. Olivia's fingers hovered over her phone screen, her heart thudding in her ears. The message from Naomi stared back at her, glowing in the dim light of her kitchen. If any part of you felt something too, then please, don't pretend it didn't happen. She swallowed hard. She could still hear Daniel moving around in the other room, his voice low as he spoke to someone on the phone. He was planning their wedding, their future, a life that made sense. But when Olivia closed her eyes, it wasn't Daniel's face she saw. It was Naomi's. Her pulse quickened. She set the phone down, stepped away, breathed. Everything was unraveling too fast, too soon. Maybe she just needed time to think. Maybe... Liv? She turned sharply to find Daniel leaning against the doorway, watching her, his brow furrowed. Who was that? She blinked. What? Your phone. You looked like you saw a ghost. His voice was light, teasing, but there was something beneath it. Something searching. Olivia forced a small laugh. It's nothing, just work. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, he said, pushing off the doorway. Come to bed soon? She nodded, but as soon as he left, she let out a shaky breath. Her phone vibrated again. Another message. Naomi, I need to see you. Olivia stared at the screen. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't, but her fingers moved on their own. Olivia. Where? Naomi's hands tightened around her coffee cup, the heat grounding her as she sat at a quiet corner table in the all-night cafe. The place was nearly empty, just the hum of soft jazz and the low chatter of a couple in the far booth. She hadn't expected Olivia to text back so soon. She hadn't expected her to come at all. But now the bell over the door chimed, and Naomi's breath caught. Olivia stepped inside, hesitant, her auburn hair slightly tousled, her coat pulled tight around her. She looked like she had been standing in the middle of a storm. Maybe she had. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. A question, a warning, a plea. Naomi motioned toward the seat across from her throat tight. Hey. Olivia sat down slowly, fingers lacing together on the table. Hey. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the night pressed in on them, fragile and dangerous all at once. Finally, Olivia took a breath. I don't know what I'm doing here. Naomi swallowed. You came. A heartbeat of silence. Then, I did. Naomi could hear the rain before she saw it. A soft drizzle at first, then heavier, tapping against the cafe windows like an impatient heartbeat. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside her chest. Across from her, Olivia sat still, her fingers tightening around the edge of her sleeve. The silence between them felt unbearable, stretched too thin over the weight of everything unsaid. Naomi leaned forward. Liv, say something. Olivia's lips parted, but no words came. She looked like she was fighting herself, like she had walked into this cafe with one truth and was leaving with another. Naomi's voice softened. Tell me I was wrong. Olivia blinked, her breath catching. Tell me that when I look at you, I don't see it in your eyes. Naomi continued, her heart pounding. Tell me you don't feel it too. Olivia shook her head, not in denial, but in frustration. Naomi, this isn't fair. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Naomi let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. Fair? She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her damp curls. Liv, do you think it was fair when I stood next to you? Smiling while you got engaged to someone else? Do you think it was fair when I spent years pretending I didn't love you? Olivia flinched, but she didn't look away. Naomi pressed on. You came here tonight. You could have ignored my message. You could have walked away, but you didn't. Olivia swallowed hard. Because I don't know how. The words landed between them like a confession, raw and undeniable. Naomi's heart clenched. Then stop trying to, she said, her voice barely holding together. Olivia let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone. She stared at the screen, as if the answer to everything was waiting for her there. Naomi didn't have to see the name. She already knew. Daniel. A choice. A future that made sense. Or the one that made her heart race. Olivia closed her eyes, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she finally looked back at Naomi, there were tears brimming in her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. Naomi reached across the table, her fingers grazing Olivia's hand. A touch so small, yet it sent something electric between them. I know, Naomi whispered. But so am I. The rain pounded harder against the glass, the storm raging outside. But inside, the real storm had already begun. And it was far from over. The moment stretched between them, fragile and trembling as Olivia's fingers hovered just above Naomi's. But then, the sharp chime of her phone shattered the silence. Olivia flinched, her breath catching as she pulled back, her hand retreating to her lap like she had been burned. She glanced at the screen, her stomach twisting. Daniel. Her heart pounded. She shouldn't answer. Not now. Not when the weight of everything she had been avoiding was pressing against her chest. But then the phone buzzed again. And again. Naomi exhaled, leaning back slightly, her expression carefully unreadable. You should get that. Olivia hesitated before standing, clutching the phone like it might slip from her grasp. She stepped toward the cafe's entrance, pressing the answer button with trembling fingers. Daniel? His voice was sharp, urgent. Liv, where are you? She glanced back at Naomi, whose gaze was fixed on the rain-streaked window. I needed some air. There was a pause. Then, I know. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? I know where you are, Daniel said, his voice low. And I know who you're with. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. What? I've known for a while, Liv. He continued, his tone eerily calm. The way you look at her. The way you don't look at me. I wanted to pretend it wasn't real, but tonight... He exhaled sharply. Tonight, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Olivia's grip on the phone tightened. Daniel, I deserve the truth. he interrupted, his voice cracking. Are you in love with her? The question hit like a lightning strike. Behind her, Naomi finally turned, her dark eyes locking onto Olivia's. She was still, waiting. For Olivia's answer. For Olivia's choice. The cafe suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in. She had spent years crafting the perfect life, a path that made sense. A path she had convinced herself was right. But what if love wasn't about right or wrong? What if it was about who she couldn't bear to lose? Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. The night air was thick with rain and tension as Olivia stood frozen outside the cafe, Daniel's voice still ringing in her ears. Are you in love with her? Inside, through the streaked glass, Naomi watched, unmoving. She wasn't asking for Olivia to say it. She never had. But her eyes, dark and unreadable, held the same silent question. Olivia's heart pounded. A part of her wanted to run, to take the easy way out, to go back to a life she understood. But deep down, she knew there was no going back. She lifted the phone to her ear, swallowing hard. Her voice cracked. Daniel exhaled sharply. Just tell me the truth, Olivia. She closed her eyes. Breathe. Say it. When she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. Yes. Silence. The kind that sucked the air from her lungs. Daniel's voice, when it finally came, was quiet. Defeated. I already knew. A heavy pause. I just didn't want it to be real. Olivia wiped at her damp cheek, though she wasn't sure if it was from the rain or something else. I'm sorry, Daniel. Another silence. Then, softer this time. Me too. The line went dead. She stood there, phone in hand, a strange numbness washing over her. It wasn't relief, not yet. But it was something. Inside the cafe, Naomi shifted. The spell between them, the one they had been trapped in all night, was breaking. It was time to choose. And this time, Olivia wasn't going to let fear decide for her. Taking a shaky breath, she turned, stepped back through the cafe door. Naomi watched her, cautious, guarded. Olivia. But Olivia didn't let her finish. She crossed the space between them, her heart hammering. And then, in one breathless moment, she reached for Naomi's hand. Their fingers laced together like they were meant to. I love you too, Olivia whispered, the words trembling but real. Naomi inhaled sharply, her grip tightening. And then, she smiled, a slow, relieved, breathtaking smile. The storm outside raged on, but inside, for the first time in years, Olivia felt like she had finally found home. The cafe felt like the safest place in the world. Outside, the rain still poured, blurring neon lights into streaks of color on the wet pavement. But inside, wrapped in the warmth of Naomi's hand, Olivia felt something she hadn't in years. Certainty. She let out a shaky breath, fingers tightening around Naomi's. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. Naomi smiled, her eyes soft but unwavering. Then we figure it out together. For the first time, Olivia didn't feel the need to have all the answers. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of a life Olivia had spent years building. She and Daniel had a long conversation, one filled with heartbreak but not anger. He deserved more than a half-lived love. And though letting go was painful, it was also freeing. Her parents took longer to understand. The wedding had been planned, the future mapped out. But Olivia had spent too much time making choices for everyone else. This is real, she told them, her voice firm despite her shaking hands. And I need you to trust me. Some days were harder than others. Some days doubt crept in, whispering about the life she left behind. But every time she faltered, Naomi was there. Not to fix things, but to hold her steady while she figured it out. One night, as they lay curled up on Naomi's couch, Olivia whispered, I used to think love was about making the right choice. Naomi traced soft patterns on her wrist. And now? Olivia turned, looking at the woman who had been her best friend, her biggest heartbreak, and now her greatest love. Now I know it's about making the true one. Naomi smiled, pressing a kiss to Olivia's temple. I think we finally got it right. And for the first time in her life, Olivia knew. She had. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Drop your thoughts in the comments.